Did we complete the test?
You are all disqualified for advanced studies until further notice. Now, you must stay here and practice.
For how long?
Forever, if you must. You'll practice until your magic is safe. Until I'm convinced you're not all walking magical hazards, just waiting to explode. That's probably nothing.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and we have a bit of a different format for you today, something we're trying out. Decided on a whim to give a game by the name of 9 Parchments a try. We'd spotted it in our Steam curator list, of which we have hundreds and hundreds of games vying for our attention. We'd also noticed it on Co-optional, and we looked at it and we got this kind of Magicka vibe from it. And that's usually a really good thing. And I looked up who the developer was, and it turns out it's the developer behind Trine, which is one of my favorite games. So, let's give this a shot. So, in order to get the best experience, bearing in mind this is a game which has, let's just say, not so friendly fire going on in it, we got a couple of players involved, and in this case, I'm joined to talk about the game by Sin Victor and Force, who are part of the magical mayhem yesterday. Welcome to the show, Sin.
Hello, thanks. I had a lot of fun yesterday and looking forward to chit-chatting about it.
Indeed, and Force, who prefers not to be called Force Strategy Gaming, so don't do
Please
that.
Stop.
Don't mention that ever again to his face at any point. Happened to come along as well for the ride, and not your usual kind of game, really, is it? Yeah, something like this. I don't usually see you playing games like that.
No, not in recent years. There was a period where I was burning through as many indie games as I could get my hands on, but I've kind of dipped out of that, and I don't know. I enjoyed it. It was good. I don't think I could see myself playing it for a very long extended period of time, but it's really good to sit down and kind of for an afternoon. I had a good time, but I'm sure we'll go into all those details here. So
yeah, definitely. So just as a quick overview of what it is, and of course you'll be seeing footage from our stream in the background throughout the course of this video. It is it's kind of difficult to explain. I mean, you could call it an action RPG of sorts, but it's not really. It's a magic-based combat game in which you're thrown into these arenas. You've got a few different spells at your disposal, and you have to fight a bunch of nasty beasties, many of which have either immunity to particular kinds of elements and spells that you have, or some sort of way that they can reflect it or absorb it. So you have to be very careful about which spells you use. And the game's very much designed around co-op, so it can go up to 4 players in this thing, which means combining the effects of different spells, doing things like the ability to all channel beams together into one giant Ghostbusters or Dragon Ball Z style power, all that sort of thing, and trying not to blow each other up in the process, because this game, it really features friendly fire in a big way. You can turn it off, and you can change the setting a bit, but to do that I think would break the game.
Yeah, there's the adjustable, the inverted friendly fire that we saw after we got done playing, and that basically means that if you are actually the culprit of friendly fire, instead of you dealing damage to your teammates, you would actually get inflicted on yourself rather than the damage that they would have taken. But I think that in the spirit of the game and how in the chaotic nature of the mayhem that goes into it, I think that definitely would be sort of defeating the purpose of the part of the fun factor of the game for everyone, is making sure you're trying not to hit your teammates, but also using the right elements at the same time. And that would really bring it down a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think to me, that's a setting you'd use with pubbies, as an anti-griefing mechanic. Because
sure.
I really think they don't want to take the friendly fire away, because there's so much AoE in the game that it would make the game too easy at that point.
Yep. Yeah, part of the game is also dodging your teammates' fire, so it's very loosely based dungeon crawling co-op action, and I say loosely based co-op because of the fact you can troll each other, which that's part of the fun in it, is whenever you're playing with friends anyway. But I definitely would not want to play the game if it was friendly fire all the time, if you went into public matches and stuff, because that would just be terrible. if people are just griefing out there and they're just able to freely deal friendly fire damage to you. It's just not fun.
Rife for trolling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Pretty much hell on earth. I am glad that they did think ahead on that one, though. It was obvious.
Totally.
It's the same reason why, like, if you look at a game like Magicka, and we're going to bring this up a lot, because it's not the same devs, but when we saw the trailer for this, I was immediately like, this looks a lot like Magicka, with the combining beams and the spells and the friendly fire. Definitely got a big Magicka vibe. There's obvious influence there.
Yeah, it's unrealistic to think that you could look at this game and not instantly think, if you know anything about Magicka, to say, oh yeah, this was very heavily inspired, it looks like.
No question.
By Magicka.
Yeah, there's no question Frozenbyte didn't look at it and say, hey, let's give that a bash. But the problem with Magicka was you had to play it with friends. Like, you couldn't play it with randoms. It was just because you could just constantly grief them.
Yep.
And that wasn't fun anymore. Like, that's fun with friends. It's not fun with some asshole that you've never met. And it's just not the way
or
to
some
go.
asshole who just happens to also be your friend, but...
True. I mean, you could probably, with the wrong group, you could still drive people to frustration and then. Force, the first thing you brought up, which I think is a very valid thing, is how long a play session of a game like this you can have without feeling like that's enough for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that might be a product of we just, we played for about 2 hours.
2 hours,
so we only saw and we only unlocked about half of the potential available skills, which I think was capped at 9, and we got to about 5-ish. And the one thing, again, we'll invoke Magicka many times here, but the one thing I will say initially is it's just much more straightforward. It's much more simplistic. Magicka had hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, but of potential combinations when you put all the elements in different orders and different sequences to make all these different spells. In this game, you just start off with 3, and then you get 4 and 5, but there's not much room to play around with them because it doesn't have that same system of combination and sequence making a difference in what spell you're using. You just have magic missile and fire beam, and like that's it basically. So
they definitely took that out, and I think, like, looking back at my experiences of Magicka, that was a very cool system, but simultaneously 90%, probably even more than that, of the stuff you could put together with the elemental mixing system was useless. And you'd just be you'd figure out what the optimal spells were, and you'd just use those.
That's true. That is definitely true.
Yeah, so I like the idea of cutting out some of the more useless stuff, and I think that the character optimization, or at least giving yourself a customization option for the spells and which ones you go with particular loadouts, I think that is actually a pretty good thing for this type of game, especially if you have that one friend who likes to play support, or the one friend who just wants to just nuke everybody, and then you've got the loose cannon that may be or may not be doing tons of friendly fire healing or damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or may not be. Can't imagine who that would be.
I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not projecting here at all. What are you talking about? They just give you a loadout, a suite of stuff, and you can scroll through the spells using your mouse wheel, or you can use your number keys as well. And like you said, we start with 3, but every parchment you collect gives you access to another spell, and each run kind of randomizes that. So you're building these characters, you're leveling them up. You've got 3 skill trees for each of them. There's actually a ton of characters to unlock. It looks like there's at least 30. They all have their own individual starting skill loadouts and 3 different skill trees. And we were looking through those, and there was some pretty wild stuff in there. There was a character who constantly pulsed lightning around them, and every time they were doing lightning spells, they would refresh this lightning pulse to the point where I don't think you could even have a friend stand near you, because they would just die, because that's all you were doing. But it seemed like they start you off with a very simple couple of characters. You very quickly unlock a variant of that character. You can swap to that, which will give you different spells, different skill trees to mess around with. And then you can follow all of these different achievement paths and do multiple runs to unlock all sorts of different new characters and spells. And then, when you collect these parchments, you kind of get a random selection of spells
from your character, or you can roll the dice. You can do like a Wheel of Fortune thing, which I did once, and I got a big healing spell from one of you guys, I think, instead
You
of...
got it from me, yeah.
Yeah, instead of my character's usual loadout of spells. So there was a surprising amount of customization and unlocking in there that I think that's where the replayability comes from, right? You know, I agree with Force when it comes to the play sessions. I would not play this for sessions longer than probably like an hour at a time. But I'd come back and I'd keep coming back because there's a lot of stuff to unlock, and there's harder difficulties that give you even higher level characters and a bunch of other stuff as well. So I think that's how it's designed to be played.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with that as well. I would be willing to put as much time as my friends wanted to play the game, but I don't feel the need to really go back there solo and be like, oh, I just need to unlock everything just to test it out. I think that it's kind of gated by the multiplayer stuff, which could be good or bad depending on how many friends you have that can play with you. This game for me appeals to me the same way that like the old school Golden Axe games used to appeal, which is like arcadey, just, you know, hack them, blow them up fun, and then with your friends, and then that's sort of it. You know, like I don't really want to call it a party game. I think it's being a little too disingenuous to what it's trying to do, but like, you know, but just it's a fun game to play. It's a very fun co-op game to play, and that kind of thing would be fun to play like maybe once or twice a week with friends. You know, just as a casual mini series would be neat. But on its own, playing solo, I think I would be like, yeah, I'll just wait until people want to play again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just like with Magicka, I feel like half the fun is when you screw with your friends.
Yes,
like that's half of the entertainment. When you try to drop that huge flaming boulder on an enemy's head, the enemy moves and your friend walks under it instead. Like that. That's where a lot of the enjoyment
in TV's case, constantly on Sinvicta for no reason.
I can't imagine why that would be. I mean, you just have some strange attraction to it. Or I just unleash my volley of deadly fireballs and you just happen to teleport right into the line of fire of them, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, I guess that's the other point to mention, that everyone default has a teleport skill,
a blink
skill.
Yeah. You're a lot more mobile than you were in Magicka. Magicka, you were really fucking clumsy, honestly.
Yeah. You'd have to queue up like a speed spell, but you just still have to wait for it to cast. And so this is that. It's really nice. And in fact, I noticed, I don't know if you guys caught it when we were playing, but you can blink while you're crowd controlled if you get stunned or something. So you can blink out of harm's way if you get hit by anything like that, which is really nice.
Yeah, I noticed that towards the end. I mean, the game's variety is definitely tied to just what kind of unlocks you get for your character as well, which is also kind of neat. I do think that they needed to start maybe with like one other class or maybe 4 total, because it's like the game is supposed to be 4-player. So you would think that they would have, okay, here's the standard classic archetype. You know, one wants to be melee, which they do have melee characters, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. You know, one would be the melee tank, one would be the healer, one would be spellcaster, and the other one could be range support or something like that. But instead, they only start you off with 2, which makes the game. And Force was kind of bummed about this at the start, and he said something about it during the stream, which is like it's deceptively lacking at the start. And I think that we also talked about
really
that.
simplistic at the beginning. I think you're totally right about that. Like there's tons of unlocks, and that's great. But being a bit more generous at the beginning, giving people a couple more character archetypes that they could choose. Because didn't we have basically a duplicate? Like there were 3 of us, and at least 2 were playing basically the same one. Yeah, it's like that seems unnecessarily stingy. I don't know why they would do that. It's just a little too reliant at that point on going to unlock the other characters.
And I think that the devs partly want to, and I'm not going to try to speak for them, I'm just assuming, but I think that they want to sort of not put labels like class labels on these characters because they want you to have this sort of freedom of choice and customization. I get that, but when 2 of the characters they look the same and they have the exact same starting abilities, and the game doesn't tell you that, don't worry, there's other spells coming up later, or like the way that to really diversify your loadout is by simply just unlocking and going through different tiers in your specialization once you start leveling up. The game never tells you, to my knowledge, anything about that. it tells you about what the talent points are and the skill point system, but it doesn't really allude to how much diversity you can get in one character from another. And that, I think, is something that's a little bit dangerous because people might get turned off. Like we kind of were at the very start. It's like, oh, well, there's only 3 spells and me and Force are playing the exact same character.
It can give a weak first impression, right?
Right.
Which is exactly what Force thought, I think, from the very beginning. It's like, this seems like it's going to be a bit simple.
Yeah. But once it started getting going, though, it was a lot of fun because I started specializing in heals. TB was going for the huge nukes, and Force was also going for Force ended up towards the end there. I think he had the same death circle that you did accidentally, and it worked out great because combine that with the starting electricity beam that we could use to stun people. That was a really good combo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely opens up as you go on and you collect more spells. But yeah, we started with only 3 each, and since 2 of us were playing the same character, I was like, this is really, really simple and really straightforward.
The fancy way to describe it, I'd say, is the first few levels are very homogenized between the starting classes or characters, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, because you can do a lot of the same stuff, right?
Yep.
And then it starts to really, especially if you do crazy stuff like, use the Wheel of Fortune to pick from maybe another class or whatever, you get a lot more variety. And you can go back to this Wizards Academy and switch out your class. And the way that the class system works in terms of levels is a bit interesting because there's a set of class archetypes, but then there's multiple variants of that class that you can unlock within that class archetype. And if you pick one of those, you keep your level, as far as I can tell. Because I unlocked another guy who was this just kind of a different color, and I assumed, is this just a reskin? No, he's got a completely different skill set. He's a completely different character. But from what I can tell, if I went back and switched to him, I would be the same level as I was with my main character. And I'd only go back to level 1 if I picked a completely different class archetype. So that's quite nice. That means you can sort of continue a run and switch things out a bit. If you want something similar to what you've got, but not quite the same, you don't handicap yourself.
Yeah, we all unlocked, I believe it was Cornflower Cornelius, which just at the surface looked like a reskin of TB's starting character, and I also think that's a little bit of a risk as well because people might just write it off like, oh, okay,
they were very unclear about that.
I'd say the biggest thing that I would complain about the game is just that they definitely should be able to let you retain the lobby and everyone go back and being able to swap out your classes, not on the fly, but at least say, hey, we're done with this mission. Let's go back to the hub. Let's readjust some stuff. We don't need heals this time around.
Maybe I want to respec. Maybe I want to swap some stuff around.
Yeah,
we couldn't find an easy way to go back to the Wizards Academy to do that.
And we still don't know.
No, maybe there is one, maybe, but I couldn't find it. So that made things a little bit unclear. It would also be nice to go back there, just like have a few minutes to maybe look through the unlock pages, find out what I need to do next. Like, I want to unlock this character, so I'll go to the list. It's going to tell me what I'm going to need to do in order to get it. So maybe I'll have a set of goals that I'll have going into the next mission because I really want to get that.
Some people would probably
see that.
Some people would probably argue that, well, you guys can do that before you start out on the mission. It's like, yeah, okay, but I think I would really appreciate being able to go in there, work on an unlock, because the game does tell you for certain unlocks exactly what you have to do.
Yeah,
and
I think it does for all of them, actually. It's just,
maybe for all of them, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, you've got a hub area for that. Why not use it, Why not have hey, go back to the academy and, then read up on that and then switch your character around if you want. Maybe do your respec if that's what you're looking to do. If you already have an area in the game to do that, then why not really let people just hop back there as often as they can? Maybe we just missed something. I don't know. Maybe we did.
It is possible. And just to clarify, because some people may not even know what we're talking about, this is sort of akin to, for anyone who played Diablo 3, released anyway, I don't know if it's changed since then, but anyone who played Diablo 3, this is essentially, we're unable to go back to town to switch out our skills. We would have to go all the way out to the character selection screen and leave the current instance that we're in. That's roughly the what we're trying to equate this reference to here. So, I think that a little bit more user friendliness, as far as, or at least maybe less ambiguousness going into, hey, by the way, I just want to switch out my spec, or I want to switch out my class because now Force is here. We don't need to have 2 spellcasters. I could go to melee. There's no real clear defined path and instruction on how to actually do that. So that might be a little bit of a problem for some people. But overall, it did not affect my end enjoyment of the game.
No, because you were just focused on leveling up the character that you had, and ultimately gameplay wise, which is probably the most important part of it, it's like, there is a lot of replayability because there are a lot of unlocks, but the core gameplay loop is go into an area, there's gonna be some monsters, you're gonna have to kill them. A lot of those monsters are gonna have resistances, or they're gonna have some sort of defense against certain spells, so you can't just throw out all your spells at them and hope for the best. You've got to try and work together in many ways, and the game definitely shines in those situations. I had a spell that was able to project an ice beam that could slow down some of the really nasty stuff that was charging at us, so I was able to use that to save order you guys, and that allowed you to then aim your bigger spells at them. So that worked out really well. I thought that loop was really good, but it is the only loop of the game, right? You go to the arena. Sorry, Force, go ahead. It's like
I was just gonna say, a lot of it seems like a lot of what the game comes down to is just coordinating like crowd control abilities and damage abilities to counteract resistances or spell reflecting, or the various defenses that the enemies have. But that's essentially it. That's the loop. You go in, you try to CC the charging monsters and all that stuff. Oh, and we should, I guess, mention too, there are boss fights. We did two technical boss fights,
and they were fun. One of them was pretty bare bones, but the teleporting, the portals that had the charging rams coming out of them, that was very interesting.
That was a crazy one. Yeah, that was a really nice. The boss design seems really, really good. I just think I would personally like to see maybe a bit more of an exploration aspect to it, because between the monster arenas, I guess, which is really lends back to what you were saying earlier, Sin, about it being like Golden Axe. You kill everything in the area, then they progress to the next area. There's very minimal exploration, but there's a little bit. You'll want to look around for hidden chests because they might have loot in them or experience, and you can get different staffs which will give you different powers, and there's also hats which are cosmetic.
Yeah, the pen quills or the quills or whatever that we missed. I mean, the devs definitely try to hide
some
those.
of them. Yeah. They're little collectibles, and they're tied into unlocks and progression. So you want to get as many of those as you can as well.
And that might be frustrating as well, because when you pick your first quill, it's like 1 of 5 collected. It's like, okay, cool. But I think by the time we had gotten to the end of the very first level that we played through, we were like, oh, we only got 2. And we were like, well, are those needed to progress, or what are those? It's not really defined clearly. And that might frustrate a couple people, especially new players. Are like, well, no, I don't I don't want to have to come back and look for this thing. And then they find out, oh, this bridge collapsed after we passed over it. I can't go back. Well, I guess.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of that. I was surprised that you can't backtrack to go find them. But it's not really that important. Like, they're just. No. The collection is cumulative, so it's just like when you hit certain milestones of having these collectibles, you'll probably get an unlock or an achievement, which leads to another unlock in some way. So.
But the game does a poor job at telling you that it's not that important. It makes you think that it's more important than it really is.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily explain itself too well in that regard. But I mean, personally, overall, I think it's a very pretty game, which is what you would expect from Frozenbyte. They make very pretty looking games. Awesome narrator, same guy from Trine, so it's good to hear him back again. And a good variety in terms of level design. We got to see a lot of different locales and a lot of different flora and fauna, so I wasn't getting too bored of being in the same area all the time. Good amount of monster variety, and challenging. We were playing on normal, and it was a challenging game, and in multiplayer it required some coordination and communication to really get the most out of it.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job, too, of pacing, introducing new mechanics and enemies. Like, it started off very, very simple, throw your basic spells, kill everything, but then we started to see charging enemies, we saw spell-reflecting enemies, we saw shielded enemies, and again, that's only within the course of the couple hours that we played, so I imagine more will continue to come out I think it's also worth mentioning, I know we've harped on some of the kind of downsides of this game, but it plays really well.
It does, yeah.
I didn't encounter any bugs or any hiccups. The character never did something I didn't want it to. Like, it's very responsive and felt good to play, which is a big plus.
Yeah, and I think it had to as well, you know, because unlike Magicka, which is just chaos, like this is a bit more focused. You do have to be a little bit more strategic about things. So the controls have got to work. Your movement's got to take you where it's supposed to take you. And yeah, sometimes there'll be a comical thing where you overblink and drown, you know, fall off a bridge or whatever. But that's half the fun, and that was your fault.
Yeah, of course. It's your fault, Force.
Yeah, spells do what they're supposed to do. And so, you know, working as a team and getting like a big beam together and aiming that between 3 or 4 people to get the most out of it, that takes some skill, and it's really satisfying to do well. And being able to throw out cool combos of spells and dot everything up, and I got a bit of WoW dungeon vibe from it, you know, and that was really satisfying to me.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable dungeon crawler, Golden Axe, the arcadey co-op, semi-co-op anyway. Half of the time is fighting your enemies, the other half is fighting positioned and
it's co-optional,
not getting killed by your
completely co-optional.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being sarcastic about that, but yeah, I think that the satisfaction definitely comes when everyone has their aim down and they're combining beams, or one person's doing a lot of the spell casting for crowd control, the other one's just nuking. I mean, overall the negatives definitely, for me anyway, were not enough to take away from the enjoyment of the game.
No, I had a lot of fun with it as well. I definitely revisit it in smaller chunks. You know, it's not a play for 3 or 4 hours at a time kind of game. It's fortunate that it's also out on consoles and on Switch, because it's a great sit down on the couch and play a little bit kind of game as well. Very suitable for that.
I was going to mention, I think especially this will play really well with a controller for any console players, because the whole system of swapping between skills is like moving from one to the next, from left to right or right to left, instead of like a keybind kind of thing. And so that'll play really well with like bumper buttons on a controller. So definitely a good way to play this game.
Yeah, that might become a little trickier when you get like your 8 or 9 spells once you've really maxed the character out, but certainly at about 4 or 5, I was just using the mouse wheel. Like, I really didn't feel the need to use hotkeys. I was finding my spells quickly enough, and since spells have a limited energy bar per spell or have a cooldown, you're going to be switching spells very often. So I found myself in this nice little rotation where I was going through everything. So that felt natural, and I wasn't confused and wondering, oh god, which spell do I pick now? There was a lot of visual clarity to make sure that it was obvious what enemies were immune to or resistant to. I wasn't going to be surprised by anything like that. So I was happy about that as well. You know, that all worked out really, really well, and the combat was consistently satisfying. It was a nice little surprise. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
Yeah, for sure. Picking from a list of like 500 games, we happened to pick one, and it turned out to be pretty fun. So there you go. Yeah.
So I think we can probably safely say between the 3 of us, it's a pretty good, solid recommend, especially if you happen to have a console and a couch and you play a lot with your family or friends. The multiplayer worked flawlessly for us online. We had no multiplayer lag problems at all. Rejoining games was super easy. Everything was great there, so it's good on PC as well.
Yeah, I would say that it wouldn't be a bad game to play with like possibly kids and stuff too. I didn't notice any obscenities or gore or anything like that.
No, definitely not. There was nothing like that. No.
Yeah, that'd be a good sit down and play an hour or 2 here and there. If you've got to entertain the kids somehow, it's a good way to do it in a fun way.
Yeah.
Or kill them. You can kill your kids too in the game if you want to see it.
Throw them off the cliff.
Yep.
If you liked Magicka, it's like a more streamlined, similar experience. So it's good.
Very good. Very fun. I recommend.
Yeah, it's not a Diablo dungeon crawler. You can play this for 10 hours straight kind of deal. No, just play it in short bursts and have a good time. Revisit it frequently. Get your new unlocks, and there's a lot to offer there if you play it that way. And I was pretty damn happy about that. So
I just watched Force blink off the edge again. Good job, Force.
Yeah, he'll do that. There's no doubt about that. So the name of the game is testing the boundaries. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, it's got a great physics engine, hasn't it? 9 Parchments is the name of the game, folks. You can check it out on Steam. It's also available on all the consoles, I believe, including Nintendo Switch. So that is available, and it's from Frozenbyte, the developers of Trine, and more recently, oh god, what was it? The Has Been Heroes, yeah, which I actually liked a lot, but didn't go down so well. I know a lot of people did not enjoy that game. This felt a lot more polished than that game, let me put it that way. That game felt very unfinished.
I never played that one, so...
Yeah, that's another discussion for another time. Forces Invicta, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, and big thanks, of course, to Frozenbyte for sending over the codes for us to try out 9 Parchments, which I think we can thoroughly recommend as a bit of a good time. Thank you very much for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, by all means, do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there, and if you'd like to check out the whole VOD of our stream, it's actually available on Sinvicta's channel. I've put a link in the description below this video. This has been a kind of pilot episode of our Curation Club. We'll be doing quite a lot more collabs of some interesting and obscure titles that we find in our curator list at some point. Hopefully they're all as good as this one, although I somehow doubt we'll be so lucky.
They probably won't.
No, I'd probably not. Thanks a lot for watching, folks. We'll see you next time.